Hello there, my name is Hannah and you are watching Gamers Waypoint. So today we are going to be talking about a game which was long awaited. In fact, we had to wait about 15 years for it, which in game industry standard time, I've just invented a new time zone, is a long wait, especially when you have franchises such as Call of Duty and FIFA being released pretty much annually. Assassin's Creed is near an annual release as well. Ubisoft have started to split that up in the past few years, but up until Origins they were going yearly with that stuff, which was great for being able to have content to play, but yes, in terms of the game we're talking about, it was a much longer wait time than we are kind of used to in this day and age, where they're able to churn out games pretty quickly because they have big teams. That is, of course, if you've not read the title somehow, Shenmue IV. So I just want to have a little bit of a disclaimer before I start talking about this game. I love the Shenmue series, I really do. I played the first one when I was 6 years old. It is the first game I ever completed, so it definitely holds a very special place in my heart. So everything I'm going to talk about in this video comes from a place of love. But I'm going to obviously be talking about why the third installment was quite different from the two that came before it, its predecessors. Let's just start with some good points actually, because I did enjoy playing the game, and it's not to say that I thought it was a terrible game by any means. I'm still very glad it was released. There are just a few things that I think also people feel about this that left it wanting, and it was just ever so slightly lackluster in a few areas, but like I say, let's start with the good stuff. It is a beautifully designed game. It is so well drawn, and you have two new places of interest which have not been previously explored. So in the third game you start off in Bailu Village, which is a really important place because it's going to help further your journey, the storyline, and it looks absolutely beautiful because it's obviously a rural place. It's got a lot of greenery. They were able to go in on kind of the nature aspect of it all. There's a lovely stream, and obviously a lot of kind of more ancient Chinese architecture, which is also lovely because it's been untouched and it's been preserved because there aren't masses of people coming through this village. It is just a localised, select few, small population kind of place, and you have kind of little subparts within that, but really it just feels like one small village despite the fact that there are technically different areas that you can go to. Second place where you visit is Niaowu. That also looks really great because you get more of a city feel, but it's not the same city feel as when you were in Hong Kong in the last game. There's still a little bit of greenery and some rural areas, but you're also by the waterfront. It feels more like a port town, which kind of has been experienced with the wharf in the previous game, but it's still its own kind of area. The way it's lit is also beautiful. If you look at all the sky at night, etc., you can tell that the lighting in the engine is being very well used. The colours pop, it looks vibrant, and it just looks very picturesque, which is definitely what they were going for, and I would kind of put a bet that quite a lot of the budget went on this, trying to make the characters and the scenery look as beautiful as possible, especially kind of because it goes hand in hand with the ethos of the game, the concept that there is obviously mythology and lore involved, and it's all supposed to be beautiful. It wouldn't really reflect well or coincide if the game palette looked dull and uninteresting. So I think that Deep Silver, who was the team that picked it up after the Kickstarter, which I'll go back to, obviously focused a lot on this, and I do commend that because it did turn out really well. It looks super good and it's very pretty, which is a lot of what we do want in video games these days, especially given the power that is under the hood of your console, or obviously in your tower if you're a PC gamer. Another good thing is that there are still quite a few things to do in terms of side missions. So as I kind of said in my last video that I did about virtual tourism, big open world games are the norm, and we do expect a lot of things to do. I would say, which is also kind of prefacing the point I'm going to get to, that these areas are not as big as we've encountered in some of the most recent games. but that doesn't mean that there isn't anything to do. A lot of things make a return, such as obviously the gambling and the work systems, etc. And also there are actually designated side missions in this game, which is a new appearance in comparison to its predecessors. There are little kind of timed moments where you have to complete a mission, whereas in the previous games you could find these timed moments, but they usually only led to a cutscene. It did enrich the story, but there wasn't anything for you to do as the player, whereas that's the opposite case in this one. You will meet people and they might ask you to do something, go find something, or you know, just fetch something for them. And also it does matter when you do this, because if you fail to do a mission, it will change the outcome of said mission, which is quite nice because it gives kind of a natural flow to it. Sometimes in games you can encounter a mission and they're like, this is of the utmost urgency, it needs to be done right now, and then you go off and play 5 more hours of game and you're like, oh yeah, I should probably go back and help that person, and when you do it they're like, oh thank you, you couldn't have done it faster, kind of thing, and you're like, I took my time with it real hard. Whereas in Shenmue 3 you can't just do that. If you leave it too long, because it does obviously have a day cycle, when you next go back to the person they'll straight up just be like, I did it myself, you were too late, thanks. And it's a bit sarcastic, which does irk you as a player as well. You're just like, oh, alright, fine. I mean, I was trying, but sure, I won't help you again next time. But anyway, that is an interesting feature because it does give you more of a sense of urgency, and it does kind of track exactly what you're doing in your gameplay to see whether you were actively trying to help that person, or if you just encountered them and you thought, I'll just go do something else first. The last thing I'll say about the positive list is that it does hold the essence of the previous games as well. So such things as the voice acting. Ryo obviously reprises his role, well, the voice actor that plays him, and it does take you right back. It's got a very nostalgic feeling to it if you played the previous games, so I'm very happy about that. And the text and the voice acting in Shenmue games is very memeable. The way that he can communicate with people can sometimes seem a bit clumsy, but it often comes off as very comedic. They've kind of gone for that again, I think. I think they told him not to change the way that Ryo speaks in this game so that it does remind you of the previous games. So yeah, it's nice to be able to feel that familiarity. And I was about to say the warmth of Ryo's voice. His voice is not warm. It is very blank in some respects, but we still love him anyway. Okay, so now I'm going to be getting into the part which is kind of more criticising the game, which, trust me, it feels a little bit harsh to do, but I also have to go there because I'm just being honest about my experiences. Also, just to let you know, if you don't agree with some of these things, that's absolutely fine. Everybody experiences games in their own way. These are just some things and notes that I took heed of whilst I was playing and thought could possibly be improved in the 4th installment. In fact, I suppose the first thing to mention, actually, because I have just reminded myself in this instant, I think that this should have ended with the 3rd game. I am actually quite disappointed that there is going to be a 4th game. That sounds a bit backwards considering that I enjoy the series a lot, but because we waited so long to get this game, like, to put it into perspective, I was 9 when I finished Shenmue 2, and I didn't get to play this game until a few months ago. I'm currently 24. So I waited a long time to be able to do this. So like I said, it probably sounds a bit weird that I would say that I don't want more, but I think because we waited such a long time, there is this fear about being able to get another game. Apparently it has come to light that the 4th one is already being written / in production, so hopefully that fear can wane because it's already being worked on, which was the concern, but also because I think there could have been a little bit more meat to this game, and if I'm honest, it feels like they were just dragging it out purposefully so they could make a 4th one, rather than having too much content for the 3rd one and having to go and kind of flow over into a 4th installment. So that is one thing that I will say, that I think they've kind of done it on purpose, and it doesn't feel like a comfortable on purpose, which You might disagree with me, that's absolutely fine, but I would have rather played an absolutely fantastic third game and seen a conclusion to the story that I've waited nearly 2 decades for, rather than wait for a fourth game, which I'm not sure when that will come out. Hopefully it will not take 15 years, but still I think that it could have all been wrapped up this time around. So going back to talking about Niaowu and Bailu themselves, despite the fact that they are very pretty, like I said, picturesque and beautifully drawn, I do kind of think that they could have been a little bit bigger. Now, the thing that I find really interesting about this is that Shenmue II, which came out in 2001, to me feels like a bigger game than Shenmue III, and I just find it kind of intriguing, because I'm not saying that they had the world's largest budget to pull this off, yet a game that is 15 years old feels like it has a little bit more substance to it, and roamability? Probably not a word, but I'm going to make it one in this case. It would feel in Shenmue 2 that you could go through all the quarters in Hong Kong. In reality, it probably only took a few minutes to get from one side of the map to the other. Maybe it was the loading times back then. Whereas in Bailu, there's a massive gap between Shenhua's house and the first little bit of Bailu village that you encounter after the bridge. They've made it look really nice, but if you look at that kind of track as a whole, it is just a lot of empty space, and there is a fast travel option, thankfully, but if you actually travel down that road, which you kind of need to if you want to get the trophies whereby you collect all of the herbs in the game, which I've done it, it's annoying. If you are wanting to platinum this game, you've got to do it, but I warn you, count every single herb, because you get lost very fast and it becomes extremely infuriating very quickly. But yes, if you walk that road, for an instance such as that, it is long. It's kind of a long piece of the game, or at least it feels like that in the context of Bailu, where nothing happens. It is just a stretch of road that allows you to get to Bailu village. I know that it's there to give the feeling of distance between Shenhua's house and Bailu. It's trying to obviously separate it and point out that Shenhua is important because she kind of lives upwards of Bailu, not in terms of like a royal perception or anything like that, but just generally in terms of the storyline. It sets her apart from the village because she is a little bit of an outsider in some respects. Her father's not really her father, it's actually just, I think, a family friend that has adopted her and raised her, which was obviously very nice of him, but so it sets her apart, but it just feels a bit like an unnecessary use of space in that regard. And then once you hit Bailu itself, there are just these little sub-villages that are actually all quite close together, and I think that it could have just been a little bit more expansive, if I'm honest. In terms of missions, it's really great because it keeps everything together, and you know that you can just fast travel to Bailu and then get everything done as you want. But in terms of exploration, it's not that big, and it's kind of the same with Niaowu. When I was looking for the herbs in Niaowu, I very quickly realised once you've opened up all of the access areas, because some places are kind of boarded off until you've done certain missions, once you open all that up, you can just go around it in a circle, and it's not that big. It looks great, and I just want to keep reiterating that because a lot of effort went into this game, and I fully comprehend that and recognise it, but I do think that some of the areas could have been opened up just a little bit more. Similarly, with kind of an unnecessary use of space, I know that the studio is super grateful for the Kickstarter. Just so you know, I think they were initially asking for a Kickstarter price of $2 million. They got overboard, way overboard, because people were so ecstatic to realise that Shenmue 3 could be a thing, and they got 6 million. So they got way over their budget, which is great, but I also just wonder what could have been done with that extra budget that they weren't already planning. And my example for this is that there is a building in Niaowu. When you go to the other side of Niaowu and you've been talking to the master at the temple, etc., just a little bit down from that, there is a building dedicated solely to like capsule looking figures of Shenhua and Ryo. And it's immersion breaking, if I'm honest. It's super sweet that they're wanting to show people how happy they are to have released Shenmue 3, as we were all happy when it came out, but it was genuinely just, I don't want to say a waste of space because the sentiment is there, but I just don't really know why they included it. It's a room full of the character that you're playing, and in the realm of Shenmue, it's not like Ryo himself is famous, so there's no reason other than breaking the fourth wall to show the player that you recognise that they are playing the game, to put Ryo in a room full of figurines of himself and the other important character in the game, Shenhua. It was there for being theirs sake. What I would have preferred is if they'd just kept it to the travel log that you can find in the hotel room in Niawu. There is a little sign-in book and it's full of all the people that pledged to Kickstarter. I think that's really sweet because it's just a bedside thing. You can choose to pick it up if you want, you can leave it alone if you want, but whilst it's closed it looks just like a sign-in book. It doesn't look like anything that is outright expressing that this is Shenmue 3, like you are playing Shenmue 3. Whereas the building, which once again you can very easily pass over and not have to enter, is just an entire room full of that stuff. Yeah, I just thought it was kind of unnecessary to have an entire building dedicated to Shenmue 3 itself within the world of Shenmue 3. Similarly, in wondering what they could have done with the budget, which I never saw the breakdown of the budget, I don't know exactly what got proportioned where, so I don't want to speak too out of line on this because I know that game production is very hard and is a heavy task. But the storyline, now this is one thing that I noticed early on, is that there is story there and it definitely progresses the series, there's no doubt about that. However, I wouldn't say that it is very meaty. There are a lot of times where it relies on the day and night cycle to progress you through the game, and sometimes there aren't actually a lot of side missions to kind of take your time when you're not doing the main mission. So spoiler alert, a big example for me was the Master Sun segment. So when you're in Bailu, you meet this master and he has to teach you a new move so that you can go back and kick some guy's ass basically, which is also another thing in this game. Ryo seems to get beaten up a lot, which always happens in the game, but in this game it seems to set him back a lot more than it does in previous games, so you're waiting for him to either recover or learn a new move, etc. But with the Master Sun segment, you know that you're working towards learning this move so that you can go and get this guy. However, he just basically spends like 3 days making you chase chickens or asking you for dumplings and wine. And it's just a little bit annoying because once you give him these things in the first place, the dumplings and the wine, he's like, great, thanks for that, come back tomorrow. And in terms of playing the game, you're just kind of like, why? Why do I have to come back tomorrow? And it's supposed to all be lending itself to a lesson that Ryo's learning, but in terms of playability, it just kind of more feels like a hindrance. Like he could have started the training there and then similarly, when you get to the training, it's kind of like, great, you caught some chickens, come back tomorrow. And it would be okay if this happened once or twice, but it happens like 3 or 4 times. And like I said, if there's nothing that you know of to take your attention after that main quest line, you find yourself just kind of wandering around and waiting until the time comes on your watch when you're able to go to Shenhua's house and then go to sleep, which just doesn't seem like very great planning in my eyes. Then again, like I said, I'm not a writer, I'm not a game programmer developer, so I know that a lot goes into it, but just from a player's perspective, I think that they could have been a little bit more open with this one. As I said, I know that there are the little side things such as gambling, etc., but kind of as a segue into that, this game also has quite a bit of forced grinding. So in the previous games, there have always been the work segments. You've always needed to earn money to do something or another, but they've usually not lasted that long, in all honesty. For instance, in the second game, when you first begin and you go to the come over guest house, there we go, it makes you believe that you have to pay the guy rent, which in real world situations you should always pay your rent. However, you can just leave every day and tell him you don't have the money, and he's like, go get a job, do this, do that, whatever. You can just full on not pay him, and then you get sent to the next place that you stay in the game instead, and you never have to see that guy again. So there are some segments where it makes you believe you need to do something, but you can kind of get away with not doing it. And then, for instance, when you are trying to meet Ren of Heavens in the second game, you have to get $500, which is a lot of arduous shifting of boxes, but what you can actually do instead is go to one of the gambling stations in the warehouse and just kind of keep saving and loading and playing the games, bidding on the highest amount that you can, and you very soon get enough money to be able to pay to go see Ren. So there are ways around that. In the third game, not so much, if I'm kind of honest. The difference here is that the gambling works differently. You earn tokens, and then you can sell those tokens to buy things in the shop, which you can then take to a different pawn shop to sell so that you get money. But it's just more of an elongated process, and because it's not inherently like you win the bet, you get the money, there's more work involved, and so it just takes a bit longer. I'm also not saying that the work parts of previous games have paid you so much money, but in this game they pay you what seems to be quite a bit less. So if you're not into the gambling thing and you're like, I'm just going to chop a load of wood until I've got enough money, for instance, to buy Master Soon the wine, which is quite expensive, it's like $2,500 or something like that, it takes a lot of time. And that's fine in terms of the fact that we're used to that, but it just made it feel a little bit more overboard than we used to in the Shenmue series. Okay, last topic for this video, because I know it's getting a little bit long now, and that is the storyline itself. So we've obviously covered the locations, we've covered the kind of side stories that you have to do, but then the actual storyline, well, more namely the ending, because obviously we've talked about the Master Soon mission, which is a part of the main storyline, but yes, the storyline itself, it feels stretched out. So it feels like all the main points that you're aiming for, if you hit them in a quicker succession, which obviously is the reason why we don't hit them in a quicker succession, it would have been a much shorter game, but also what you're aiming for, it feels like the gaps are sometimes a bit big. But obviously if they were closer together, there wouldn't be that much content in the game. So in terms of the main storyline, there is a lot of kind of running about, chasing things, and sometimes chasing false leads. Don't get me wrong, I recognise that that has also been a part of the previous games, but I just feel somehow that they gave you more in between and more missions that were actually integral to the story, so that you didn't feel like you were just running around kind of aimlessly in between the important parts, as it were. Like, for instance, you meet quite a few masters in the game, but if I'm being honest with you, there are only two that make a difference, Master Soon and Master Bei. Other than that, they're just kind of characters that you encounter. They don't really play that big of a part, whereas in the previous game, for instance with Li Xiaotao, she's a massive important part to the game and has also a lot of backstory herself, which gives reasoning to why she is as she is, whereas when you meet these masters, there's just not a lot of storyline. I think what I'm realising is that some of the key characters don't get fleshed out, really. The story focuses very much on Ryo and Shenhua, which is fine because obviously they're the ones going after the mirrors, but these other accompanying characters, we don't really learn about them, we don't get told about them, and therefore you don't really empathise with them as much as you do in the previous games, because basically everyone that you meet, for example like Yuan Dazu, you learn about them. Whereas when you learn about things in this game, okay, yeah, you do learn about Shenhua's dad and the stonemasons, etc., and it does give you a bit of an insight into Iwao, your dad's life before you were born, which that bit was pretty cool, I did like that. But yeah, everybody else just seems to be there as filler, which is just a little bit disappointing. So like I say, the storyline itself seems stretched out, and I feel like there could have been more important parts put in between the main story missions to give it a fuller feeling. And then, like I said, we come to the end of the game. So the end of the game, you catch up with Landy, and it feels like it should be this big pinnacle moment. You're like, right, I've finally got him. With the amount you train in the game, but kind of the level of experience you feel like you've got to, it's understandable that you don't beat Landy in this fight. In fact, he basically wipes the floor with you, which is very understandable. But at the same time, the end of the game is so abrupt. And I honestly sat there after I finished it being like, what just happened? Because you have this fight, you have this other mysterious lady character that comes in who has been a little bit of a false decoy. You see her earlier on and she's just there about the town of Niawu, and then you encounter her later on and she's instead got red hair and a red dress on and, you know, is all voluptuous and everything. At first it's hard to recognise her. The transformation is so great that I didn't realise that it was like, oh, I get it, she's been put in my way a lot and now she's actually part of the Chiyo men. It felt like two different characters, so say what you will about that one. But yes, so she's there, she gets introduced, you beat up a load of Chiyo men, you make your way to Landy. Basically, the place where you're fighting in sets on fire. He escapes, again, obviously. You get on a boat after having granted rescued Shenhua's dad, which is the entire point of the game, and then it just leads to a cutscene, and this cutscene has a lot of talking over it, a voiceover, monologue kind of thing, which the game does often, but then all of a sudden they're on the Great Wall of China. And as far as I'm concerned, there was no context for that. They said that they needed to go to another important place and that there was another place to go to obviously continue the search and the story, and you know, this is where Landy is probably heading. But in terms of the end of the story, it's like, great, we got Shenhua's dad, we're out. And it was just very cut and dry. There was no kind of outro, there was no leading out, there was nothing to kind of wrap up. It just wrapped itself up, if that makes sense. And it was so fast, and it just, yeah, left me wanting more. And I suppose they've done that because there's a fourth game coming, but I feel like they designed this entire game knowing there was a fourth game in the works and not putting as much attention into certain things in this game as they could have done if they didn't have a fourth one waiting, if that makes sense. So yeah, I suppose to kind of wrap up that point, I think that there just could have been way more missions, way more instances of connecting with NPCs rather than just running into them and them being a slightly progressive plot point, whereas they could have been a more main feature, which I feel was the case in the previous games. And then yeah, there could have just been it sounds weird, I was going to say like a bigger finale for the end of the game. It feels quite grand in what you do. Obviously there's a massive fight sequence and you see Landy and you're like, this is it, and you get a bit amped and you can feel the adrenaline going, but the way that it cuts off just doesn't match the build-up and the anticipation. It's a little bit of an anticlimax, if I'm honest. As I say, I did enjoy the game. I completed it, I spent a lot of time on it, did quite a few of the trophies. I'm glad that it exists, but I just think that they possibly went ahead of themselves and they were thinking about the game after this one rather than the game itself, which just seems a little bit backwards considering it took us so long to be able to get to a point where the third game could even start production. It was just kind of on the cutting room floor for so long, and in some respects it kind of looks like they just gathered it up as they could and were like, oh right, okay, this goes there, that goes there, and then they kind of left a lot out which could have made it feel like a more involved experience. Another thing that I would just like to mention is that I love the fact that you can ring people when you're in Hotel Niawu. You can ring people like Goro, Nozomi, you can ring Tom. It's so cool and it made me feel so nostalgic and I love that about it. However, I just wonder why none of them are the original voice actors, and I just really wonder why. Like even Ren of Heavens is a different voice actor. Like I don't know if it was because the people just didn't want to do it, maybe they felt like the project was so long ago that they've kind of just finished with it, or maybe they were asking for a bit more money. Maybe they were just thinking, oh, we'll give some new voice actors a chance because maybe some fans of the series can do that job and feel a part of the game. Anything could be the case, but yeah, when I picked up that phone and I heard Nozomi's voice, I can't lie, there was a massive part of me that was just like, this ain't Nozomi. Who is this? So yes, that was another part that I wondered about, but other than that, I am glad to have played it. There were also some really awesome bits, like the little kid, Bei Xinghao I think his name is. He's the kid that you encounter in Bailu who wants the white lure fish from the capsule machine, and he is just the cutest thing I think I've ever seen. He's so polite, he's just wonderfully adorable, and he calls you Ryo Bo, and it's so cute. So he's my MVP of the entirety of Shenmue 3, is the kid that wants you to get the white lure fish, because he's just painfully cute, like super cute. So there you have it guys, that has been the video. Thank you for watching. If you got to this point, then thank you so much, because I know that this has been quite a long one, but these have just been some of my views on Shenmue 3. I can't reiterate this enough. I love the series, I'm glad that this game exists, but these were just a few of my opinions on how I think it could have been improved upon, and I hope that they do improve when the 4th game comes out. Hopefully the 3rd game was just kind of a bit of a stepping stone and we'll experience something truly amazing in the next game that comes out, although we don't know when that's going to be. But anywho, like I say, thank you for joining us. If you've not already, I hope that you consider subscribing, sharing, commenting. Please let us know in the comments below how you felt about this, how you felt about Shenmue 3. If you've been wondering whether to play it or not, do. It's well worth it, especially at the price it is at now. It's not expensive, as some games can be, but also check out the previous games. They're a bit outdated now, but they're full of just nostalgia. They're just full of kind of wonderful little bits that you don't encounter in games these days. They're a little bit like of a cult following now, but if you've got the time and a few spare buckaroos, get on that one. Anyway, until next time, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you have a great day, and please consider continuing this journey with us. That would be so awesome and mean so much. And don't ever stop exploring. This has been Gamers Waypoint, your map marker for all gaming entertainment. See you later guys.